Greetings. This is the Solid Signal Podcast, and the week is September 16th, 2019. So look at the Solid Signal blog, I hope you do, blog.solidsignal.com from last week, and you'll find that I wrote a really tough article about Apple's recent iPhone launch event, or whatever they wanted to call it. I spared no opportunity to dig into Apple for basically everything that they did wrong and everything that they didn't do. And I stand behind that article, but at the same time, I tell you that I'm getting an iPhone 11. And it's interesting, just a couple of days later, we ran, and a number of people mentioned this, we ran an ad for the iPhone 11. So how is it that I could be so rough on Apple and at the same time be in the line with everyone else, virtually speaking? Nobody really lines up anymore. Well, if you're not a longtime Apple fan, you probably aren't going to understand the strange mix of anger and anticipation that comes with Apple product launches. And this isn't a new thing. I remember when Apple was looking to launch its Generation 3 products back in 1999. Man, that dates me. And I dug into them then because all of a sudden they went from very reasonable business-looking machines that looked like beige boxes to all of a sudden this weird, goofy, bright blue, clear, white thing with a round mouse. And I thought this was the end of Apple, and it was stupid, and that I would never own one. And then it turns out all of those things were wrong. I said the same thing about Apple's iPhone, the original one, when it launched, because the lack of a real physical keyboard, I thought, would doom it. I thought not being able to dial without looking at the thing was going to just kill it. I was wrong. But by then, I'd gotten used to becoming wrong about Apple products. And I began to realize it's not just me. There's a lot of folks who, for the last generation really, have been tearing into Apple's latest product offerings and merrily buying them anyway. And why? Because I will say this about Apple's products. More often than not, they are not perfect and they disappoint, but like an actor, a musician, or even a favorite relative, they still draw just this huge wellspring of affection from people because they are, in general, very well engineered. Apple has a long history of not being the first to release anything. Voice assistant, that was somebody else. Full screen phone, somebody else. Good camera on the back, somebody else. Camera on the front, somebody else. Pretty much every feature you can imagine in Apple's products has been previewed at one time or another, usually on Android products, which have honestly come before Apple in almost every single case. The running joke is, and Samsung has said this themselves, if you want to see what Apple is going to be featuring next year, buy a Samsung phone today. There's some truth in that, and there's also some truth in the fact that when Apple does something, it does it with a level of polish, a level of precision that it's hard for anyone else to beat. Samsung of late has come close, but Apple still holds that crown for just making these, gorgeous, artistic kind of phones that people just want to hold on to. I'll say that older folks are a little bit more inclined to love Apple than younger folks, and that's partially because they've been on this journey for such a long period of time that, they've been there with Apple and they feel kind of the evolution taking place. Where if you're coming in now, you're probably going to look at a Samsung phone and say it's more modern and also more reasonably priced. Apple's products certainly have broken boundaries when it comes to price. They've never been cheap. Comparably priced Apple products have always been more expensive, whether they're compared to PCs, to other phones, to tablets, even to music products like speakers. They're always more expensive, and they're not necessarily better. I'll be honest, but there's just something about an Apple product that it just kind of works and feels good, and they draw you in. And of course, Apple's ecosystem, once you get into it, is hard to give up. It's easier these days, I think, to give up iTunes than it used to be, since due to the Movies Anywhere service, a lot of your iTunes movies are just going to migrate across to Vudu or Google Play or Amazon or wherever you choose to watch your content. Also, about a dozen years or so ago, Apple moved away from copy protection for all of its iTunes music, and so it's easier to move away from iTunes, and of course these days we all stream music, whether it's from Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, so that's even less of an issue, and we all stream movies we very rarely own anymore, it seems like. But other parts of the iOS ecosystem are a little bit harder to give up. It's great if you've got an iOS device and you have friends with iOS devices. You can actually tell when they read your messages, which goes a long way for dispelling some of the insecurity that happens with texting. Texting is by nature an insecure medium, and I could do a whole podcast about that. I won't right now. But from sharing pictures and texting to AirDrop, which is a really very slick way of moving things from device to device. If you haven't tried it, you really should. These are just things that iOS still kind of does better. It doesn't do video chat necessarily better. Skype is just as good as FaceTime. But FaceTime is convenient in a way, it seems like, that Skype isn't. And if it's always one of those things where when you're going to do a video chat, you're asking, does somebody else have FaceTime? Can I try it with them? Or do I have to go to Skype? That's kind of how the feeling is for a lot of people. Apple's done a really good job of that, and they've done such a good job that despite the fact that they've had very, very few breakthrough products in the last couple of years, and they've had more than their share of broken products in the last couple of years, they're still out there making money. They're still out there putting out phones that people are going to buy. I'm going to buy the iPhone 11, and I'll be honest with you, I don't need a new phone. The phone that I've got works pretty darn well, and I'm not going to use the iPhone 11's additional features. I've got a DSLR if I want to take good pictures, and my gosh, how many cameras does a phone need? What's it got? Like 10 of them now if you count the Face ID ones, I think. So, I don't need any of that stuff, and I crave it. I admit that I crave it, but also Apple products hold their value, so I don't feel so bad about the fact that I'm trading up. I'll be able to get about $400 to $500 for my extremely good condition phone. I put it in a case that I got at Solid Signal, and I keep it in really good shape. And that is going to lessen the impact of paying $1,000 for another phone. That's what it's really all about. More often than not, Android phones end up being kind of disposable. They're, 2 years in, yeah, many of them do allow you to replace the battery, but you don't. You just get rid of them. They're not something that you keep or pass on from one family member to another or resell. Apple products are, and that's been true also for a lot of years, where old Macintoshes hold their value a lot better than old PCs. My point, my friends, is that the characteristic of ranting and complaining about Apple products and buying them anyway, it's not limited to just me. If you read that article I wrote and you said, hey, he's being really tough about the iPhone, but I'm going to buy one anyway, don't feel bad. I'm right there with you.